still love you, if I still love you.
Hey, it's Sizzling Saturday, and you know what time it is. It's time for Reflectivity right here on KBLA. We're going to face some truth. We're going to work it out, and we're going to go beyond those surface issues. Yep, beyond black and white. And today, helping us to do that is the senior pastor of Pilgram Baptist Church. Now, you know, this guy right here, pastor, no disrespect, but he is going to bring the noise after serving for over 30 years of in a pastoral capacity. He is used to being in the urban setting and in inner city ministry, and he strongly believes that the hope of any community is found in the gospel of Jesus. Raymond Dix has served faithfully in preaching ministry for the Lord of our Jesus Christ for 44 years, and he is right out of the Midwest in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Welcome forward, Reverend Raymond Dix, Jr.
Hello, Gina. It's very nice to be on your program, and thank you for having me. And every time I hear that bio, I feel like I aged 10 years, so thanks.
Well, we'll jump right into that. There's a reason for that, Reverend Dix. Tell me, why is it, and can I call you Raymond?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So there's a reason for that. And when did you first come to the realization that you wanted to preach? I mean, how long has it been?
Well, that's a great question. I started and preached my first sermon at 16 years old. So I was
How old?
16. I was 16
Wow.
years old. So 48 years. So for those of you doing the math at home, 48 years. So yeah, that'll tell you how old I am.
Okay. And so I think you got ordained pretty soon thereafter. And I don't know exactly, maybe you can explain to us what ordination really means. Does that just make you legal?
That's good. I have a story for that too. But no, I'll tell you this. I didn't have in my mind that I wanted to be a minister. I was set on being a engineer. I had thought about Purdue University. I wasn't a math genius, but I thought I would be serviceable enough to study engineering. Civil engineering in particular, I like the design of roads and bridges, and that always kind of fascinated me. But the Lord had other plans. And you know, when God intervenes and interrupts your life, you have to be ready to answer that call. And I guess we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But yes, I was ordained as a minister at 17, and it kind of makes you legal in a sense of being able to perform weddings and funerals and administer the sacraments of the Lord's Supper and baptism, which in the Baptist Church are the two ordinances. Sacraments is more of a liturgical term, but the ordinances of the church. Now, the funny story is this. The first wedding I performed, I was probably about I don't know, 23 or 24, and did that wedding and didn't realize that it was my responsibility to take the marriage license to the county. And so for 2 weeks,
boy,
I had that license in my suit pocket. And so the couple called and they were like, hey, we went down to get our certified copy, and they said, we're not married. I said, oh my goodness. So from that point,
they said, you're fired.
Yeah. From that point on, I made sure that I give couples back their wedding license after I sign it and say, you are responsible for taking it to the county. Don't leave it with me, because you may not find out you're not actually legally married.
Yeah. So how did your parents handle all of this? I mean, what's the story? I mean, like, did you go to them one day and say, hey, mom and dad, I want to preach?
No, and again, it was after the epiphany, I guess that's the best way I could call it, this interaction with God's presence. I was actually hadn't turned 16 yet. It was April of my 15th year, 1 month from my birthday. And it was about 3 months of real struggle with this idea of what God wanted me to do. And I was kind of like Jonah. I decided that whatever way God was pushing me, I'm going the other way. Because I even told the Lord, I said, hey, it's a kid in my Sunday school class, God, that seems to enjoy this. Why don't you call him into the ministry and let me go on about my business? Because I had made up my mind pretty early, by the time I was 15 or 14 or 15, that by the time I got 18, I was going to be done with church. I was going to be done with it. I did not relate very well to my church. Went every Sunday, we youth meetings and all that. So God had to intervene in my life. If he was going to get me, he had to get me before I turned 18. And
wow,
that was so telling my parents was, after about 2 months of struggling and wrestling with God, like Jacob, you lose that battle. But I told him, my dad, first thing he said was, hey, so what you gonna do for work? Because he didn't see ministry, and I give him credit, he does now, but he didn't see ministry as a full-time vocation or profession. It was a calling. You worked on, you preach a sermon on Sunday, and then after that, you go out on Monday and you hit your regular job and make a living and support your family.
Okay, so you jumped in about 10 feet of water right there, and you made me do the backstroke and a butterfly or something. When we come forward, I do want to follow up on both of these questions. One, I felt like I heard Michael Jackson singing "Where Is My Childhood" for a second, and then two, I'm curious about what it is that people say. They say I have a call, and I want to know something more about that, because you talked about wrestling with God, and certainly I want to jump into some of the things that can help us who are listening today to get beyond our black and white issues, somewhere in the middle. When we come forward, we'll be with Reverend Raymond C. Dix, Jr., and this is Reflectivity. KBLA will be right forward. right here on KBLA. It is Reflectivity, and I am your host, Gina A. Towns, and we've got a most amazing guest today. Reverend Raymond Dix started in the ministry when he was 17 years old. I'm welcoming him to the show right now because I want to hear more about that story, and then I want to move on into what he's learned over the years. Welcome to the show, Reverend Dix.
Thank you very much, Gina. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. So we left off, and I mentioned that I heard Michael Jackson in the background singing "Where's My Childhood." I mean, how did it play out for you? And I think this is really relevant because we have a generation, probably, not that many are in church, perhaps. And I hate to make blanket statements, but I do know that there are a lot of people who just don't attend. They may listen online. They may not go. They may have their own form of worship, but corporate worship, has taken a real turn over the past, let's say, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. So how do you relate what you went through in your childhood in this wrestling thing to where kids might be or young adults might be now?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, fighting God or wrestling with God those 3 months before I announced and acknowledged my calling, which came after my 16th birthday. First person I called was my pastor. I didn't know who else to talk to. And that call came through to him at 1:00 in the morning. And I'm sure I woke him up. And now as a pastor today, when you hear your phone ring that late, you just seldom is it good news. I'll put it like that. But I didn't really know how to handle that, and so I would say that when you look at this idea of God's interruption in your life, as a teenager, I was looking forward to doing all the things that teenagers did. I was my driver's license. Matter of fact, my brother told me, he said, "Are you nuts? You can't preach. You just getting your driver's license. We can go to parties and everything like that, and all those things." He said, "You can't." And his idea as a preacher that is no fun. And then, when quite frankly, it was kind of my idea. But a funny story happened. We were down in a friend of the family with their home, and we were playing a game of pool, 8-ball or something like that. And a lady came down the stairs and she said, "Which one of you is the young boy preacher?" And I said, "I am, ma'am." And she said, "What are you doing playing pool? That's not a game for ministers." So now in my mind, I violated some code of Christian conduct that or expectations, and I soon would learn that you have people that have expectations, but as a teenager, you lose in a sense this idea of what regular, I'll use an air quotes, regular teenagers did. And there was always this pull to experience life that teenagers do. And then the next thing I know, I'm in my 20s and I'm kind of mourning my teenage years, and so you get to make a lot of those, hopefully you get a chance to make mistakes that you are able to overcome early in life. So you don't make them later in life when they might be more costly. But yeah, that was the thing. My relationship with my parents changed when I was in that wrestling period. They thought I was losing my mind, which I did too, in a sense. But I understand what Jonah understood. When God has a call on your life, when He has a purpose for your life, He will take you and put you right back on the beach where you thought you would never go. And I found myself right there in Nineveh, having to do the work that God had called me to do.
Now, that's an interesting point. You say that you were called to do. First of all, for a lot of people listening, they may feel like they have a call, but it might not be to the ministry, but you have a call. You hear something calling you. Maybe an inner voice is what we'll discuss. And sometimes you got to figure out what that inner voice is. And that's the difference between black and white and the things that we have to reflect about and have some activity toward. But you mentioned making mistakes, and I would have to imagine that starting this journey at 17 that you did and have made some mistakes. What do you feel like you've learned, and is this a route let's just say, we've got people who are coming from every kind of walk of life right here. They're experiencing hardships, been through divorce, trying to make ends meet, loss of parent, loss of child. And I think what you've done is hold on to the hymn of faith, if I have to put it in a way. What would you recommend to people when they've made mistakes and are struggling to hold on to their faith and stay the course?
Well, that's a great question, and I would say emphatically, beyond a shadow of doubt, the number one and most important thing that I learned is that God is a God of grace. He is a God of grace. He is a God of mercy. And there wasn't any mistake that I made early on and even yet into my later years that God didn't already know I was going to make. And with his foreknowledge, with his omniscience, God knew that he was calling an imperfect vessel to do a work that he had designed for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when that imperfection reared its ugly head in my life, I had a loving, caring God who I could go to repentant as a father and be able to receive his forgiveness, and he took my repentance. And I think the other thing that I would say, not only is God a graceful God, but the other thing I learned is and the Lord had to remind me of this. I don't live in ministry for the approval of people. So much that we do in life, we have other people's approval in mind. I mean, you can go all the way from how ethnic challenges that we face today, racism and things like that. Part of one thing that I was liberated from as a Black man was I was liberated from the approval of white folks. I don't need that approval to validate me. I have the approval of the Most High God. So I think that I learned that you don't work for the approval of people, but you work for the approval of God. And as long as He's satisfied, I'm good.
I love what you just said right there, because reflectivity. When I determined that this was the name of this show, it is beyond black and white, Black people and white people, but the things in our lives also, we have to get beyond what's black or white, what we feel like is true or false, to get to some sort of meaning. I don't want to lose this, because you talked about judgment. Now you've talked about people pleasing now, and so there is judgment that comes, and then that's sometimes, I guess, what forces us to be people pleasers, and that can put us in a really, really bad place. And let's just give this example for those who are in this conversation with us. You were at work last week, and your boss wanted you to do something or another that either you didn't know how to do, didn't want to do, weren't thrilled about doing, or maybe even caused you to question your values in what it was that you were being asked to do. And so we get caught in either people who judge us because of what we do or don't do, or we do it and then we're not feeling great about it because we're people pleasing. How do you maneuver that so that next week when I'm faced with the same thing? And I think some of these things may be character issues that we are working on from time to time, and we'll see them pop up in different ways, in different instances as we're growing in those areas. But how do you navigate turning that experience into something that we'll call growing?
Well, I think number one, we have to recognize that we are social creatures by design. God created us to be interdependent on each other and not independent. No one should be able to live or totally alone by themselves. That's why we experience things like loneliness when we don't have interaction with other human beings. But here's the key right here. I think when you talk about how we navigate this, it has everything to do with where we place our value, where we place the approval of ourselves. So psychologists, people call it self-esteem. Where do I get my self-esteem from that says I'm a valuable human being? I can't rely on other human beings to provide that self-esteem. I need to rely on the fact that it was God who created me in his image, his likeness, and all the esteem that I have as a human being, even with my imperfections, come from knowing that I'm still made in the imago Dei, the image of God. And so I walk in that image. I have esteem from approval by God, and I don't need the approval of other people. Now, people's approval is nice, but it's a fleeting thing. The
Yeah.
polls will have you up one day and down the next. So we have to recognize that our approval comes from God. He's the one that places value in our lives, and the fact that he gave his son Jesus for us is the greatest indicator, I think, of how much God values his creation.
So, we live in a time right now where all of the images that are before us are fleeting images. I mean, it's there 1 second and then it's gone the next, and then the news comes on and then there's some more news later. I mean, and we just are, it's almost like, I'm surprised most people don't have some sort of neck problem. I do have, a legitimate issue with TMJ, and we'll talk about that one day on the show. But, I mean, just the jerking that goes on in our mind and how that affects our spirit, what we think about ourselves, where we see ourselves in the world. And you talked about being interdependent on, one another, and at the same time trying to have to manage not being a people pleaser. And then last week on the show, I had Buddy Lewis, who's a comedian in Los Angeles, and he just talked about, as well, being able to find that space where you can say what you want to say, and saying it in a kind way, and navigating who we're becoming. I said, so what I get, and what I even told my mom, even at 94, 95 years old when she passed, was that we just never get a chance to take a break from growing. Every single day is an opportunity for us to grow, and how we maneuver the ways that we grow. Like, it may not be the same last year as it was this year, but the consistency of, if you call God the creator, or Yeshua or Yahweh, or if you adhere to your faith in any form or fashion, there are some key pillars, which I certainly, want us to dig into before we go to break. What are some of those key pillars that you would suggest for people as they are trying to navigate, 1, a call, 2, their growth, and 3, even if you will, a perfection? I think of a piece of gold and the refinement that it goes through by fire, the tough days, the tough times, the tough periods. Sometimes there's a whole season, a whole 7 years where, we're feeling like, man, this thing here is so rough. When will it be over?
Yeah, I think, first of all, very quickly, the pillars that I would rely on in a situation like that is to, 1, know that God has a purpose for your life. Now, it may not be the same purpose as your neighbor. The Apostle Paul talks about that we all have gifts, and there are various gifts in the body. My eye doesn't do the same thing that my hand does. And thank God for that, because my hand is not equipped to do what my eye does. Neither is my eye equipped to do what my hand does. So if I'm an eye or if I'm a hand, I accept the fact that I have a task that helps the body grow. So that's the first thing, being able to understand that you have a gift, and it may not be your neighbor's gift. I think one of the things that happens in the church, and getting back quickly to this self-esteem thing, we don't teach it. We don't teach people to have their esteem in God. So we get people to come in that have been victimized by society, victimized by a sinful world, victimized by being in a place, the world that is perishing. And in the church, rather than offering them this idea that you can be actually free from the effects of these things upon your life because of who you are in Christ. And I think those are a couple of things that just really, and maybe after the break, we can talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, those are a couple of pillars I found out.
That is, that's a lot to chew on. And I look forward to us continuing our conversation when we come forward. Reverend Raymond C. Dix is our guest right here on Reflectivity Beyond Black and White, right here on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Gina Towns. Hey, it is sizzling. We are right here on our Sizzling Saturday at KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got a lot that we are chewing on today. Reverend Raymond C. Dix is with us today from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he is helping us to plow through how we can get ourselves a directional map towards growing, towards becoming something, and knowing how to hear what we're hearing, what our desires are, our joys are, what our even difficult times can turn into if we just allow it. Welcome forward to the show, Reverend Dix.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking about these subjects.
Well, I'm sure you do. You've made a lifetime of it, and we thank you for your service to the community and to the betterment of people. You know, but sometimes the church does get a pretty rough rating. But before we really talk about that, because I am going to come to that, I want to follow back up on the pillars that you were talking about, because if our listeners are taking notes, can you just give us, the 1, 2, 3, 4 of
Sure.
Here's the pillars?
Sure. I mean, first of all, know that God has a purpose for your life. He has not designed and brought you into his family without purpose. Number 2, know that your esteem of who you are is dependent on God. And I guess number 2 would have been that your gift, we all have gifts, and that they may not be the same as somebody else's. Number 3, I would say, hang your hat on the fact that you don't live for man's approval. Your esteem is in the fact that God has chosen you. I've had many times in my life when I've said, God could have chosen anybody to do what I'm doing. I wasn't so special, so personally, gifted as a human being. I'm flawed like everybody else, but God chose me to do this work. He could have got this from a donkey. And occasionally in scripture, you saw that God does get what he wants from his omnipotent power and control over all of creation. And I think that's important. So God could have chosen anybody. I'm appreciative of that. My esteem is in the fact that he loved me enough to choose me. And then I think the other thing is that, as you serve in the kingdom, you serve with humility. And I think that number 3 brings number 4, that humility. You can call it humility, love for what you do. There are going to be moments, days where I've had these moments where I've asked myself, how did I get down the path where I end up serving in ministry? And, if I'd been an engineer, I probably have a lot more money than I do right now. But, who knows? The service of God is not about material reward. And it is about knowing that you are building something that he has called you to do in building the kingdom of God here on earth. We serve in a world that's perishing. The Bible tells us that. And so in a perishing context, how do I then find life? How do I find life in that? I find life in the fact that I am helping somebody else come to know Jesus as their Savior. And that means eternal life. So I think those 4 things, I'm sure there are many others I could go into, but those are what came to mind in that question, is that these are the pillars that you can hang your hat on, especially when you have those tough days.
Mm-hmm. I want you to know that I'm doing a lot of my own reflecting, and as you're talking about things that For some people, it's church, no church, God, no God. But a lot of people really do exist somewhere in the middle. And it is because people have felt judged. And if they have felt judged, whether it was in their family, whether it was, in school or a workplace, and then they come to church and they feel judged and they can't even get to where you're talking about. I personally do operate in my faith, and I have come to a conclusion over the years. You cannot really ask people if you believe something and you're staunch about it. You can't judge people if you have never sat down to explain what it is that you're judging them about. That's number one. And so that then forces us to be able to have conversations with people. And I think right now, and especially where we are in our country and in our communities, there's just a lack of conversation, period. There's a lack of seeking conversation. And from that, I just don't know how you grow if you don't feed that basic. I think that's just a basic need and instinct of people. The curiosity thing is not just, for Curious George. That is for Curious Georgina, Gina, Raymond, and for all of us. So there's an inquisitiveness that we have that I see in our society that has been dummied down by so many different things. There's so much that's watering over, and it's like growing a plant. We are like a seed that's in some soil. You can give it too much water and kill the roots. You don't give it any sun, you'll kill the roots. And so there are just things that we need that have to do with our mind, our body, and our spirit. And one of the things that I think is very important, and I really am trying to achieve on Reflectivity Beyond Black and White, is to feed all of those things so that we can grow, that we can see beyond the color lines, that we can see beyond what people tell us is either this or that. I mean, I love that song when it was you could get with this or you could get with that. I love that when that was out, but that's really not all that there is. I feel like I'm calling on Michael Jackson a whole lot here, but I remember when he's saying it don't matter if you're black and white. Well, it does matter in this country if you're black or white. And so, how white people are, who don't like some of the things that are going on, are having to navigate through with their friends at church and at work. And then black people, how we're having to be a little more vocal. We're having to deal with kids being hung, being murdered, drowned. I mean, and it's going on in a fairly regular fashion right now. And not that it hasn't ever gone on. I don't know that there's been a period in our country where it has not gone on, but we have not talked about it. It does not appear in the news. And so even when we look at where we are as a society, as humanity, it can be a very heavy load. And maybe sometimes that's what prompts us to do some seeking. And sometimes we end up, as you have been, seeking God, hearing a call, and really delving into it and understanding. And that's what I think I want to get to today with you, is understanding that without judgment from others, that we can, do that seeking, perhaps find and enjoy the process of a journey of growth. We're going to pick up on that when we come forward. I'm Gina Townsend. This is Reflectivity. We're facing truth, working it out, and we're doing it together. It's beyond black or white, and we'll see you in about 3 minutes. Reflectivity, KBLA Talk 1580. Hey, I am Gina Towns, and you have stumbled upon and hope you are here with us. I hope you've been here the whole time because you really don't want to have missed what we've been talking about today, right here on Reflectivity with Reverend Raymond C. Dix. Over 30 years, 44 years in the ministry, but 30 years in a pastoral ministry. And he is really helping us to work some things out and think, really, really directly about some things in our own lives. Welcome forward, Raymond Dix.
Thank you so much, Gina. Again, it's always a pleasure to be
Sure,
with you.
absolutely, Raymond Dix. Raymond Dix, you've been taking us to the water, and hopefully we're getting something to drink here. Tell me, where do you see? Do you have children?
I do. I have three boys and one girl, and my daughter's a registered nurse, and that's I'm counting on her in my old age because them boys might leave me on the porch all night.
They do say that there is something to having a daughter, but certainly I count on my son. But when you think about your children, your parents, your faith, your children, and even that generation that might be your grandchildren, where do you see, if you see, a break in the idea of faith, and how has that been a hindrance, if it has been a hindrance to our moving forward in our community, as family units, and in our greater society?
Oh, I mean, Gina, there is so much to unpack in that, even tying with what you were talking about before the break. I look at it from this perspective. My generation, and I think, we can pretty much say that we might have been the first generation not to say we're going to make our kids go to church, first of all. A lot of my contemporaries and friends said, I was forced to go to church. I was there every time the door opened, and I'm going to make sure that my kids do not go. And I think that was a mistake when it comes to creating a faith decision. If you were Islamic, or if you were Jewish or Muslim or Jewish, you would find that your faith is a part of your socio-cultural dynamic. So you weren't just Muslim because you believed in Allah or studied the Quran. You were Muslim because of the way you were brought up, the way you were raised, the values. And Christianity is no longer in America a cultural dynamic. So we don't practice in America cultural Christianity, which means my faith is shaping my behavior and my interaction with other people, including my family members. So people with faith don't necessarily pass that faith down to their children in an intentional sort of way. So I think that's one thing. Now, on the other hand, too, what complicates that situation is the emerging generations look for authenticity. And the church has lost, in many ways, its ability to present the authentic gospel. For example, when I was young, I got baptized at 7 years old. And it was about, you get baptized, you join the church. So
Did you know what you were doing?
I knew I was making a commitment to God. I had no idea the depth of that commitment. And I think that was okay, because I don't think God expected me as a 7-year-old to understand the depth of a life, turning your life over to Him. But I think what He did expect is that the place where I was fellowshipping in a community of faith, He did expect them to teach me that. And when that is not done, the church is God's cutting board, pruning board, cooling board. It's also God's hospital. And so when you come back to the point you made about judging, what often happens is that we refuse to think of the fact that I'm not here because I got it all together. I'm actually here because I don't have it all together. I'm actually here because I need help navigating this thing called life, the thing that I will not get out of alive. And so I'm here to do that. And if the church understands its purpose, and I think that's what younger people are looking for. If you say all these great things about God, when are they showing up in your life? And I think that we need to say, to stop the judgment is to recognize that everybody's on the scholarship. everybody, one scholarship player shouldn't be talking about another scholarship player when you are not paying your own way and I didn't pay my own way. You know, who do we say paid it? We got that great hymn out there that says Jesus paid it all, you know. And so if Jesus paid it all and all to him I owe, then quite frankly, how can I look at you and start picking the areas of your life where I think you need to improve? And Jesus talks about that. You're trying to get the speck out of your brother's eye and you have a log in your eye. And that's why I think the judgment part of it, let the Holy Spirit do what he does. You know, people grow, people mature, and hopefully the conviction will come from God and their lives will be changed. We need to love and support people through that process rather than say, oh, look at what you got on today. You know, that's not church worthy or those kinds of things. I had a fellow come to my church and he did, and I told people, leave him alone. Leave him alone. And it worked out to his benefit.
Funny story, and I can already see that we'll have to have you back on the show at some point. I have spent a lot of time in Los Angeles where our listeners are, and certainly we are on social media. And so, but people in LA will have a special little chuckle on this because I used to, when I was in LA, would go to City of Refuge in Gardena. And I remember one Sunday, Bishop Jones was so upset because the week before a woman had come in, and I suppose she had been, maybe, danced in a club or something like that. And maybe she came straight from the club to church. I don't know what all that was going on because I wasn't sitting in that section. But what I do know is that Bishop Jones stopped the service that day, and shout out to my boy, Alex Evans. And he says, so I want to say this about some of you sitting in here with your, suit and your, dress tied up to your neck or whatever. Some lady came in here last week looking for, some refuge, and she was asked to leave. And I better not ever hear of people being in judgment like that. You see, those are the kinds of things to me that help us to not exist in somewhere between black and white. Let's put it, right where it is, that none of us, have that right. I personally have been through, grew up, Baptist, been to CME, went to Catholic school, read what Seventh-day Adventists believe, spent some time at the Nation of Islam, had my Quran, and at one point was just like so overwhelmed by life and things that had happened in the past in my childhood. I just had to sit it out for a minute. I was like, I'm gonna try to read this myself. I've got to compare these things and figure out. And so that there does come a point, and I'm gonna, suggest to, people that are listening, find something to read. Something that can ease your mind, if that's what you need right now. And sometimes it is very simple because the Bible is a roadmap. I did find that out. But, starting in the Psalms where there is just a deep breath to be had. A young lady told me the other day she was reading Lamentations and had never read much of the Bible before. I said, don't start there, but we will pick up on this when we come forward another day. Reverend Dix, thank you so much for being with us. This is Reflectivity. We are facing our truth, working it out together. We'll see you next Sizzling Saturday on Reflectivity Beyond Black and White. I'm Gina Towns.